Then came the real kicker, the plans they were making for dinner that evening, right down to the kind of wine they'd order. I didn't hear just one betrayal that day, I heard dozens layered on top of each other, spoken in soft tones as if the words were wrapped in velvet. But underneath that velvet was a blade, cutting through every memory, every promise, every unspoken trust. I closed the laptop slowly, but my mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't know existed. All at once it wasn't just Tommy, it was the other missed calls, the unreturned texts, the casual explanations for late nights at the office. How many other business trips had there been? How long had I been the only one in this marriage who didn't know? A part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand explanations and scream for answers, but I wasn't going to do that. There was no sense in letting rage dictate my next move. Instead, I decided I would keep my calm and take my time. The first thing I did was check the prenuptial agreement we'd signed 8 years ago, back when cheating seemed abstract and distant, something that happened to other people. There it was, clear as day, infidelity voided any claim to joint assets. Perfect. Now I had a plan, and it was going to be thorough. The first night after the call, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, the events of the day replaying over and over in my mind. The calm I'd maintained in that moment had been a mask, underneath it was chaos that threatened to pull me under. But I knew that if I let it show, if I reacted too soon, I would lose any advantage I had. I wasn't about to give Laura or Tommy a chance to clean up their mess before I'd laid out my trap. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a steaming cup of coffee, my laptop open and ready. I wasn't going to settle for a single recording as evidence, I wanted proof that could withstand any lie Laura might come up with. With a few keystrokes, I accessed Laura's email account. She'd never been particularly cautious with her passwords, and since I'd set up our home network myself, it was trivial to recover what I needed. Her inbox was an ordinary mess of work emails, newsletters, and automated reminders, but buried among the clutter were messages from an account I didn't recognize, Tommy. I scrolled through their exchanges which went back months, each one revealing a little more than the last. There were photos, little love notes, and even travel confirmations for weekend getaways I'd thought were conferences or client meetings. Every email and every photo was a nail in the coffin of what our marriage had once been. Then I dug deeper. I went through her cloud storage, her phone records, even her location history, things I could access without leaving a trace. By the end of the day, I'd gathered more evidence than I needed to prove the affair, but I kept going. I wanted every last shred of proof, not because I needed it for divorce, but because I needed to understand just how far this betrayal had gone. I found more than expected, secret dinners, hidden gifts, even video chats while I'd been sitting in another room. It was as if I were watching a twisted documentary of the last year of my life. For a moment, I let bitterness rise. How had I been so blind? I'd thought our marriage was solid, sure we had our ups and downs, but nothing that couldn't be explained by busy schedules and work stressors. Now I realized those explanations had been excuses, distractions keeping me from seeing what was right in front of me. But it was pointless to wallow in those thoughts. Instead, I turned my attention to finances next. If I was going to end this marriage, I wanted to do it cleanly and on my terms. I had invested in various ventures over the years, stocks, real estate, even some cryptocurrencies, and knew Laura had limited understanding of finances. So began transferring assets strategically, moving money out of joint accounts into accounts belonging solely to me. I didn't touch anything that would raise immediate alarms, but ensured that if it came to legal battle, I would be well ahead. I also reached out to a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but one with a reputation for handling high-conflict divorces involving infidelity. We discussed prenups in detail, ensuring it would be ironclad, with no legal room for Laura to contest it. As it stood, she wouldn't get a cent of marital assets, and I'd make sure it stayed that way. Then there was Tommy. A little digging revealed he wasn't some random fling. He was a senior executive at a rival tech company, with his own life and his own wife. The irony? His wife Natalie seemed completely unaware of his double life. I thought about what she would do if she found out, wondered if she'd choose calm over chaos, strategy over rage, but that was for her to decide. My job? Simply give her information she needed. That night, I drafted an anonymous email attaching several pieces of evidence, including photos and emails leaving little room for doubt. Kept it simple, a few lines explaining she deserved to know what her husband did behind her back, and scheduled it for 3 days later, just enough time for me to put more pieces into place. Next, focused on Laura's work. She was marketing director at major firm, a position she'd climbed after years' dedication. Not interested in costing her job outright, not yet, but contacts at company people I'd met through her over years. I started planting seeds, little rumors easily growing into full-blown office gossip. Framed as concern, saying things like Laura's been traveling a lot lately, is everything okay? Or heard she's spending time with someone from another company. Didn't give specifics, I didn't have to. By end week everything set in motion, Laura due back home following Monday, and she had no idea what awaited her. Collected evidence, prepared finances, even laid groundwork, rumors spread. I wasn't just taking steps to end our marriage, I was preparing to dismantle every aspect life she built behind back. Now all left do? Wait. Weekend past blur, quiet anticipation. Went through motions, everyday life as if nothing changed, but beneath veneer normalcy, calculating next moves with precision, chess player planning 3 steps ahead. When Monday finally arrived, I was ready. Laura's flight landed late afternoon. I didn't pick up from airport, not even text ask if got safely. Wanted feel subtle shift, the quiet absence, usual attentiveness. When walked front door there, no warm welcome, no embrace. Instead found packed suitcase by entrance, slim stack papers, kitchen counter. Michael. What's going on? Her voice trembled, unease, hadn't been there before. She looked from suitcase papers, confusion quickly giving way, first traces panic. I watched from across room, letting silence stretch just moment longer than comfortable. You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 2.
Update. My wife thought she had turned off her microphone, but she had actually turned off her camera. As soon as she walked away, she called some guy named Tommy and started saying things I never dreamed of, so I started recording so I wouldn't miss a word she said. When she arrived home, I personally gave her the divorce papers and told her she would not get a penny. Part 2. Those, I said, gesturing to the papers, are the divorce papers. Laura froze, the color draining from her face. What? What are you talking about? Why are you? I didn't give her time to finish the question. I know about Tommy, I said plainly, without a trace of anger. And I know about all the other little secrets you've been keeping. Her eyes widened and she started to speak, reaching for excuses like a drowning person grasping at driftwood. Michael, it's not what you think. I can explain. You don't need to, I interrupted, my voice calm. I've already seen the emails, heard the conversations. I know exactly what it is. I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a USB drive. It's all here if you'd like to refresh your memory. The look on her face was one of pure disbelief, a mix of shock and a hint of anger, as if I was the one who had wronged her. You went through my things. She accused, her voice rising. It was remarkably easy, I replied, letting a small cold smile touch my lips. You should have been more careful. Laura's composure began to crumble. Please, Michael, don't do this. We can work through this. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. I cut her off with a raised hand. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended, but it did the job. We're not working through anything. This isn't a negotiation, the prenup is clear, and there's nothing to discuss. She stared at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I could see the gears turning in her mind, searching for some way to talk herself out of the situation, but there was no exit, I had made sure of that. Think about what you're doing, she pleaded, her voice now tinged with desperation. What will people say? Do you really want to throw away everything we've built? Throw away? I echoed, allowing a hint of incredulity to creep into my tone. You're the one who threw it away the moment you brought him into our lives. I pointed to the suitcase. You'll find everything you need in there for a few nights. I've changed the locks, and you can come back later to get the rest of your things after we've worked out a schedule. It wasn't just about throwing her out, that would have been too straightforward, too easy. I needed her to feel the weight of her actions, to know that every day from here on out would be shaped by decisions I'd made without her. Once she was gone, I set the second part of my plan in motion. I made another call to my lawyer, instructing him to file the divorce papers the next morning. Then I turned my attention back to Tommy. I had scheduled an anonymous email to his wife, Natalie, to be sent on Monday evening, just as Tommy and Laura would likely be in the middle of their damage control. The email contained not only evidence of their affair but also a detailed timeline that left little room for doubt. I had even included a brief note suggesting she check Tommy's recent hotel stays against his supposed work trips. The intent wasn't just to expose him, it was to create a storm he couldn't easily weather. Meanwhile, I made a few more strategic moves. I reached out to a couple of mutual acquaintances who worked at Laura's company. I kept the conversations vague but dropped just enough hints to let the rumors catch fire. It didn't take much for word to start spreading that Laura had been involved with a high-ranking executive at a rival firm. In her world, even the appearance of a conflict of interest could be damaging. I didn't need to destroy her career, I just needed to tarnish her reputation enough to cause a few cracks. From there, I would let the natural gossip of corporate politics do the rest. For now, I remained patient, the pieces were in place, but I didn't intend to reveal my hand all at once. There was still more to do, more to set in motion. I knew the situation would unfold like a chain reaction, each step leading to the next with its own set of consequences. I was determined not to let anger cloud my judgment, every move I made was calculated and deliberate. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about dismantling the lies that had been built behind my back piece by piece until there was nothing left for Laura or Tommy to hold on to. And I was going to make sure that when everything finally fell apart, they would have no idea what had hit them. The day after Laura's tearful exit, I got an email from my lawyer confirming that the divorce papers had been filed. I forwarded the confirmation to Laura with a brief note, no further discussion needed. I knew it would sting, there was no room for ambiguity now, this was a clean break, and I had no intention of looking back. As I drove home from the office that evening, I wondered if Tommy had received his own surprise yet. I hadn't heard from Natalie, but I wasn't expecting any direct response. The email I'd sent her was anonymous and detailed but didn't invite a reply. If she had confronted him, and I was sure she would have, then my work was already beginning to pay off. The next day, Laura sent me a barrage of messages, apologies, explanations, even desperate pleas for forgiveness. I skimmed through them with detached curiosity, almost as if I were reading a stranger's story rather than my own. She insisted that the affair had been meaningless, a distraction from the stress of her career, and that it hadn't diminished what she felt for me. It was the kind of justification I expected, an attempt to diminish the betrayal into something forgivable. But forgiveness wasn't on the table. That night, I got a call from one of my contacts at Laura's company, a mutual friend named Jake who worked in a different department. We weren't especially close but had shared beers a few times over the years and maintained a cordial professional relationship. Hey man, he said cautiously, I don't know if you've heard but there's some stuff going around about Laura. It's causing quite a stir, he continued. I've heard, I replied nonchalantly, not giving anything away. It's unfortunate, but I'm not surprised. Yeah, he said slowly. It's just. Things like this can get messy. I figured you should know in case it starts affecting her work. You know how people can be. Appreciate the heads up, Jake said neutrally. I'm handling it. The call confirmed what I'd hoped. The whispers had begun to spread. I knew Laura would be feeling pressure now, not only from me but from her colleagues and perhaps even from higher-ups. It wasn't an outright scandal, not yet, but the foundation was cracking. The very environment where she had thrived and built her career was starting to question her integrity. I could picture her trying to do damage control, explaining things away in half-truths and feigned misunderstandings, but that wouldn't save her. It would only draw more attention. The thing about rumors is that they have a life of their own. Once they're out there, trying to squash them only makes them spread faster. The following week, I got a call from Natalie. Her voice was shaky, a mix of anger and despair. Who are you? She asked accusingly. Why did you send me that email? I paused for a moment, choosing my words carefully. I'm just someone who thought you deserved to know the truth, I said calmly. You don't need to know who I am. I'm not looking for anything from you. I just wanted you to have the facts. Do you know what you've done? Her voice trembled with restrained fury. You've ruined my life? I resisted the urge to correct her, to point out that it was her husband who had done that, not me. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I replied instead, but I think you already knew something wasn't right. I just connected the dots for you. Natalie hung up without another word, but I knew this was far from over. Tommy's world would be crumbling now, and that was exactly what I'd intended. He would be dealing with fallout at home, and if I played my cards right, soon enough he'd be facing professional consequences as well. A couple of days later, I received a tip-off from an anonymous email account. The message was simple but direct. Tommy. You can click on share more to see if there is a part 3.
Final update. My wife thought she had turned off her microphone, but she had actually turned off her camera. As soon as she walked away, she called some guy named Tommy and started saying things I never dreamed of, so I started recording so I wouldn't miss a word she said. When she arrived home, I personally gave her the divorce papers and told her she would not get a penny. Part 3. Suspended pending investigation. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I read the words. The affair had not only cost him his marriage but was now putting his career in jeopardy. Apparently, someone had maliciously shared his misconduct with his company's HR department, highlighting how his relationship with Laura potentially violated company policies regarding conflicts of interest. I didn't need to guess who that someone was. Meanwhile, Laura's situation at work continued to deteriorate. The rumors I had planted had blossomed into full-blown speculation, with people questioning whether she had used the affair to gain insider information for her company. It didn't help that her performance had suffered in the wake of the divorce filing. She was distracted, unfocused, and, according to Jake, struggling to keep up with her workload. It was only a matter of time before her bosses started asking uncomfortable questions. Eventually, I got another message from Jake. Hey man, just thought you should know Laura's been put on probation. They're keeping it quiet for now, but the word is she's one mistake away from losing her position. It was unfolding exactly as I had planned. With each move, I had pushed them both closer to the edge, and now they were teetering, struggling to hold on. The confrontation wasn't just a single explosive moment, it was a gradual, calculated unraveling. It wasn't about shouting matches or slamming doors, it was about watching them lose control of the narrative they thought they had mastered. There was nothing they could do to stop it. I took no pleasure in the pain I had caused, but I did find a certain satisfaction in knowing that justice, however unconventional, had been served. Laura and Tommy had played their game, and they had lost. The final phase was near, but I wasn't quite done yet. There were still a few more steps to take before everything came crashing down completely. With Laura's probation and Tommy's suspension in place, the groundwork had been laid for the final blow. There was no need for theatrics or grand gestures. Subtlety had worked well so far, and I intended to see it through to the end. First, I focused on Tommy. His suspension wasn't just a disciplinary action, it had opened the door to deeper scrutiny into his activities. I had one more card to play, an anonymous tip to the regulatory authorities about potential insider trading involving his company. The evidence I provided was circumstantial but suggestive enough to warrant an investigation. It connected his suspiciously timed stock trades to the periods surrounding his meetings with Laura, suggesting that he might have had access to non-public information. I didn't care whether he was actually guilty, I just wanted to keep him under the microscope and buried in legal fees. I imagined Tommy's world collapsing around him, trying to juggle an impending divorce, a career in freefall, and now a potential legal battle. It wasn't about pushing him over the edge, it was about watching him hang there, dangling by a thread, knowing that no matter which way he turned, there was no way out. Laura, on the other hand, still had a bit of fight left in her. She continued sending messages alternating between apologies, pleas, and attempts to justify her actions. I could tell she was trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage her career, to stop the rumor mill from grinding her reputation into dust. Her desperation was evident, but I gave her no responses, no reactions. Silence can be louder than words, and I wanted her to feel that absence acutely. The breaking point came when one of her key accounts, a major client she'd spent years nurturing, abruptly decided to transfer their business to another firm. I knew this because I'd reached out to the decision maker in that company, a former colleague of mine who owed me a favor. I didn't explicitly tell him to drop Laura's firm, I simply mentioned that there were ongoing issues that might reflect poorly on any business associated with her. That was enough to tip the scales. Laura was now standing on thin ice, and I could feel it starting to crack beneath her feet. A few days later, I received a call from Jake, the mutual acquaintance who had kept me updated on her situation. He didn't have good news for her. Laura was let go today, he said. It wasn't a big scene, They gave her a chance to resign quietly, but I don't think anyone believes the official story. Thanks for letting me know, I replied, not letting my voice betray any emotion. I hope she lands on her feet. Jake hesitated. Listen, Michael, I don't know everything that happened, but you're sure you're okay? You've been pretty composed through all this. I'm fine, Jake, I assured him. Some things you just have to let go of. But I wasn't letting go just yet. There was one final move to make, one that would be as much a lesson as it was a statement. I reached out to Laura directly for the first time since the day I handed her the divorce papers. The message was brief and without emotion. You'll find the rest of your belongings in storage. The key and address are in the envelope at reception. Our financial settlement has been finalized and you won't hear from me again. I took satisfaction in imagining her walking into that storage unit, finding not just her personal effects but every little memento of our life together boxed up and sealed away like artifacts in a museum of a marriage that no longer existed. Each box was labeled with impersonal precision: clothes, books, miscellaneous. There was no warmth in it, no nostalgia. I didn't leave anything behind that she could use to make me feel guilty, no shared memories that might make her think I regretted my decision. In the end, Laura was left with almost nothing from the life we had built together. The prenup ensured she couldn't touch any of the major assets. The rumors and scandal cost her the career she'd spent years cultivating. The only thing left for her was the realization that the world she'd tried to balance, our marriage, her affair, and her career, had collapsed like a house of cards, and I had been the one to pull out the foundation. I didn't relish her suffering, but I did find closure in knowing that she and Tommy had learned that actions have consequences. The life they had tried to build behind my back wasn't just ruined, it was shattered beyond repair. From what I heard, Tommy's wife had already filed for divorce and the insider trading investigation was dragging on, putting his career in a prolonged state of limbo. As for Laura? The last I heard, she had moved to a different city, starting from scratch. With everything finally settled, I decided it was time for me to move on too. I sold the house and relocated to a new city where no one knew the details of what had happened. It wasn't about running away, it was about starting anew without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. In those final moments as I stood in my empty house for the last time, I allowed myself one small indulgence. I took a deep breath and let the satisfaction of closure wash over me. There were no lingering questions, no second guessing. I had done what I needed to do, not out of anger but out of a desire for justice. And then I walked out the door, closing it behind me without a single look back. In the months that followed, I found solace in simple things: taking long walks, learning new hobbies, meeting new people. I didn't speak much about what had happened. There was no need to rehash the past, it had already served its purpose. I had exacted my revenge, but more importantly, I had found a way to rebuild without carrying the weight of resentment. As for Laura and Tommy? Their paths faded into the background noise of distant lives. I no longer had any connection to them. Occasionally I'd hear a mention of their names from someone back in my old circle, but it was always just a brief note, a fallen career, a scandal, a relocation. They were like echoes of a story that no longer belonged to me. Life, in its quiet unassuming way, went on, and for the first time in a long while, I was content with where I was heading, away from the wreckage towards something that was mine alone to shape. It was never about forgiveness or forgetting, it was about letting go. Thank you.